In 1619, English settlers in New England would go down in history as the first Thanksgiving celebrated by the Pilgrims. Some 50 years later, the English settlers were the cause of the indigenous people waging war against them, usurping their English rule upon the Indians. King Philip's War, also known as the First Indian War, the Great Narragansett War of Metacom's Rebellion, took place in southern New England from 1675 to 1676. It was the Native Americans' last-ditch effort to avoid recognizing English authority and stop English settlement on their native lands. The war is named after the Wampanoag chief Metacom, later known as Philip or King Philip, who led the 14-month bloody rebellion.
I thought I knew the story of the first Thanksgiving. Pilgrims, 1621. Plymouth Rock, we all learned it in school. But then I found this document, the 4th of December, 1619, Virginia. 2 years before the Mayflower even left England, there was another Thanksgiving. And it wasn't a feast, it was something else entirely. So here's what happened. Captain John Whitleaf, this guy had already survived Jamestown, which, if you know anything about early colonial history, was brutal. The Virginia Company picked him specifically because he knew how to keep people alive. They put him on a ship called the Margaret with just 35 men and gave him a job. Sail to Berkeley Hundred and become its first governor. Berkeley Hundred was going to be a new settlement, a fresh start, and Woodleaf was the guy they trusted to make it work. The 4th of December, 1619, the Margaret arrives. 35 exhausted men step onto Virginia soil. They'd made it. But here's where it gets interesting. Woodleaf had instructions, written orders from the Virginia Company. And buried in those instructions was this one line that would eventually spark a debate about American history. The instruction said this: the day of the ship's arrival should be yearly and perpetually kept holy as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God. Read that again. Yearly, perpetually, a day of thanksgiving, not a harvest celebration, not a feast with Native Americans, a solemn day of prayer marking their safe arrival. This was 1619. The Mayflower wouldn't land until 1620. So why don't we learn about this in school? For centuries, nobody really remembered Berkeley Hundred. The settlement struggled and the story faded. Until 1958, when Virginia started the first Thanksgiving festival. Every year since, they've done a reenactment at Berkeley Plantation, trying to reclaim this forgotten piece of history. After the first Thanksgiving, among the handful of seminal events that shaped the American mind and continent, King Philip's War is perhaps the least studied and most forgotten. In essence, the war cleared the southern New England native population from the land, and with it a way of life that had evolved over a millennium. The Wampanoag, Narragansett, Nipmuc, and other native peoples were slaughtered, sold into slavery, or placed in widely scattered communities throughout New England after the war. In the war's aftermath, the English established themselves as the dominant people. As important, King Philip's War became the brutal model for how the United States would come to deal with its native population. Later names like Tippecanoe, Black Hawk's War, the Trail of Tears, the Salt Creek Massacre, the Red River War, and Wounded Knee all took place under the long, violent shadow of King Philip's War. It seems particularly ironic, then, that Massasoit is seated prominently in our romanticized view of the first Thanksgiving, while the more graphic image of Philip is his severed head skewered on the end of a pike. The real tragedy is how we came to embrace one image and lose the other. In removing King Philip's War from our history books, we became, according to the rubric, destined to repeat it. That we did with a vengeance.